Hood is just this weird, wild place where serious mental health issues come up during that time more than any other time in their life, and systems disconnect then. It's one thing to have an array of services for young people. It's another thing to get young people engaged in doing it. You could build it, but they might not come. It may not turn out that way. How can you find the right engagement approaches for our young people in order to get there? Sometimes that we have to back off of adulting, which is hard for me knowing that I have 2 teenagers also. I don't do a great job of it, but listening and having them be supports for each other and really leaning into that a lot more rather than saying, oh, no, we're the experts. We know what it is you need.
Yeah.
Peer support area is something that the more that we can invest in that and really harness the power of peer supports, the more our young people are going to be connected in with people that really get them and really know what they're going through and can help them with some of the trauma they've experienced. It's not just about an individual therapist and a patient, so to speak, right?
Marc, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you on the podcast. You are the planned president of YouthCare, which is an amazing organization that we've now had the pleasure of working with and collaborating with. But your reach has gone far beyond that. And I'm super excited to hear more about all of the ways that you see the world, everything that you're doing, all that you're working on. I wanted to start and go kind of back to the beginning because you are a clinical professional. You have a PsyD, right? Tell me about why you decided to pursue that path early in your career and sort of what impact that had on you early on.
Sure. First of all, thank you for that credit. It's probably more than it's due. And, I hope my family is watching because maybe then they'll really kind of feel proud of me in a way that maybe I don't get otherwise, but thank you.
You'll finally get congratulations for all of your hard work.
Absolutely. I love it. So yeah, I'm a PsyD, so clinical psychologist. But as I say to a lot of my colleagues that at this point in my career, if you were to ever have me as your therapist, and, be on my couch or something like that, you probably end up a lot more messed up than you were walking in for the first time. So I haven't done direct service for quite a while. I did start off doing a lot of that, but what really was interesting is that early on in my work, I spent a lot of my time through practicums and then internship working at Therapeutic high schools and Therapeutic day schools. And what you don't get taught early on is how to work with young people in sort of a general setting like that. That's just so different than one-to-one. I was used to being trained on like, okay, you got to keep your personality to yourself. If somebody asks you about yourself, you have to respond with what is it about that you want to learn. And it was just completely different when you're working with young people in a school setting or in a residential setting or something like that, where all of a sudden you have to be personal with them and you have to get to know them. And so that really changed a lot of things in my perspective and in the work that I did, where I started to recognize 2 main things through all that work. The first one is just how big relationality is in the work that we do and getting to know the young people on a level that maybe you were never trained for in psychology classes. And that means, how to disclose. When do you disclose? How do you kind of work with a young person and talk to them about what's going on in more of a relational type of thing than a therapist to a young person type of thing. So learning a lot of that in kind of a group context. The other thing that I learned a lot of from there is really how to think about the work that we do on a more macro level. And that's what got me really excited, getting a sense of not just how things work from a relational level and in a group setting, but then also how does the business work? How do you make sure that you get your funding right? How do you make sure that you can sustain? How do you get young people excited about the work and maybe their families as well? And then how can you build that out so I'm not just helping one young person, which is great, and you can get a really big influence from doing that. But how can I make that population wide? How can I work with young people that are, program wide in my case early on? But then, as I move further into career, how can I work with young people statewide or even federally to make an impact? And that's what really got me going from there.
Super fascinating. So much to jump into. Do you have any stories of those therapeutic high schools that really stood out as to why the relational aspect of the therapeutic modalities is so important? Like, were there any stories that you just remember and think about from that time?
I have so many, almost to the point where you feel like you could write a book.
You
My
probably
colleagues
should. You probably could about it.
My colleagues are better at that than I am, but one young person comes to mind who really struggled in high school quite a bit, and it was a therapeutic high school, and she was incredibly challenging in the classroom because she really liked to get the attention of everybody else that was there, yet also was able to maintain her focus when she had the right guardrails around her and when she had the right supports that were around her. When she didn't have that, things kind of went awry. And so what you would see is that she would get into fights with other girls. There'd be other boys who would be into her and get into fights across each other for wanting to have her as a girlfriend. And yet she would kind of create a lot of this chaos. And so what was really incredible for me is how seeing her trajectory of focusing a lot more on the social aspect and a lot more on the trauma that she experienced early in life, bringing her down and having that be a label for her. So that way, and she kind of used that in order to get out of school. She used that in order to get into a lot of the fights that she was getting into. And over time, she started to recognize that change. She started to recognize that she really was distracting from the success that she could have by getting into some of these arguments, by blowing off school and some of the rest of that, and started to realize what was really important to her. And we were able to really grab some of those incentives with her and help her recognize that and help her discover who she was, to the point where like she was able to have those outlets of having fun with friends and with other peers, yet also be able to work on school to the point where she's able to graduated successfully, was able to reintegrate back into a regular high school, and went on to post-secondary school from there. And that's just one of many stories where our young people just really develop over time through both some of the chaos that they've experienced early in life and some of the chaos that comes to them as they start to age through.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I bet seeing the transformation from a child who has a really challenged background and seeing the impact of the investment in them and the continued trying to I guess I'm sure you try a bunch of different therapeutic modalities, not all of them work, but when you find one that does, I imagine that's like such a profound experience to have. And I bet that also seeing it for so many different kids at a place like a therapeutic high school, you probably got an education in the reality that there's no one size fits all, which is interesting given that you quickly got interested in the broader like population level, broader investment of, the ecosystem, right? So how did those experiences clash together when you started thinking like, hey, I think I actually want to get into the deployment of the system of scale type? Like, how did that merging match when you sort of, after you had these experiences?
Yeah, great. And for me, it really was how amazing it is to have those individual transformations and see those transformations happen from time to time. And some of my staff would say like, that's it, I'm set for the next 6 months because of how great it is to see some of these young people really excel. For me, I loved being able to do that. And I was thinking, how could we then scale that up? So when I was working in some of the schools, are there ways that we could bring that program on a larger scale, maybe through training, through some of our therapeutic modalities, kind of like bringing in best practices and see that transform more and more young people? And that brought me further on to some of the work that I did on a larger scale with young people, especially young adults with more serious mental health needs, where it got to be so important for me to see how a full therapeutic school and a residential and an apartment-based program and a parenting teens program and so on and so forth could really make a difference in young people's lives, especially those that are, that have really struggled with a lot of trauma early in their life, a lot of separation and things along those lines. And so for me, being able to scale that up with figuring out therapeutic modalities, take those therapeutic modalities and test some of them, get the funding for it, get excitement and feedback through our young people and through the families that we work with, and then be able to talk about outcomes both on an individual young person level and then on a grand program level is really where I've found my niche and really got excited about the work that I do.
And this is essentially what you did at Thresholds for 2 decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me about maybe just some like highlights from your experience of the time there. Like what were some projects that you did there that you were really proud of and that you sort of look back on and be like, I'm really happy that we were able to do that?
Yeah, there are so many projects that we were able to do. Thinking about nailing it down to just a couple, we were able to start. We were able to start a program for young people experiencing homelessness, and we were really excited about being able to do that. That was a large scale grant that we got, that we brought into the work that we did that we hadn't done before, and bringing that into the fold of the work that we did was just really exciting, because we had been working with young people that were connected to the child welfare system for quite a while. And we knew that some of the principles that we were working with could also bring in young people that are experiencing homelessness. What we know about that population too is that they tend to not be as much literally homeless as they are kind of couch surfing or moving between different folks. And so finding young people that needed that support was different. And then really kind of bringing in the work that we did for youth experiencing homelessness and serious mental health needs together was really big. That's one area that I'm really proud of. Another area is I got to start the original first episode Psychosis programs in Illinois. And it's been going on in other states, but in Illinois, we started the first ones here. And this is really services for young people that are experiencing symptoms of psychosis within the first 12 to 18 months. And the idea behind it is that if you're able to get in there early enough and within that time frame, the trajectory of young people and the success of them getting back to their lives is so much higher than if those symptoms of psychosis go on for a much longer time. And so this was something that had started in actually overseas and then moved over to the US, to the point where the feds mandated every state to put in a certain amount of dollars to establish first episode psychosis programs. And so Illinois, when we were getting ready to get started, I had already begun the work on establishing all of it before the federal funding came to Illinois. We got to start some of that work and really excited about the work that we were doing there. And this was a program that really assisted young people in getting back to the life that they really want to lead, get back to relationships, to school, to work, to family, in a way that was just incredible. And the programming that we provided was just at another level for a lot of these young people.
Why were you passionate about that topic? Like, did you have any personal experience with folks with first episode psychosis, or was this sort of just like a really exciting field at the time?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I had some folks kind of in my extended network that have definitely gone down that road, and hearing how challenging life had become for them without the right supports was just incredibly eye-opening and really sad. And also working at an organization where there are a lot of adults that had long-term psychosis and schizophrenia, knowing that there may have been a way to really support those folks in those early stages, in those young adult stages, really made a difference for me. So that was one part of it. And then the second part of it is seeing how you could have a therapeutic programming that really made a difference and had outcomes that were demonstrating that was really exciting to me. That like, okay, let's jump in there. Look at all these lives that we could potentially save. And so that got me really excited to get that program going.
Because this must have been 10 or 15 years ago, right? And I've learned a lot about how far the field of behavioral health has come in terms of measuring outcomes, even over the last decade. So it's not surprising to hear you say like, oh, it was very exciting that we could measure this stuff. We could see its impact. Can you talk to me about like 10, 15, 20 years ago? Like what were the problems that you were trying to solve, or that were sort of the opportunities that you felt like existed, and maybe like which of those you felt like were addressed well, and maybe which still exists today that continue to need addressing?
For me, the biggest challenge that was going on then that we were looking to address is how to provide the right services for transition age youth and young adults. And if you think about it, the idea of young adulthood is really a concept that hasn't been around forever. You know, if you think back to the 1950s, 1960s, you know, the idea of that you are a child and adolescent, and then you kind of move right into those adult markers. And that really changed with our society. And there's lots of reasons why that happened. But the idea that young adulthood is just this weird, wild place where young people are involved in more social aspects than any other time in their life, in between work and school more than any other time in their life. But yet serious mental health issues come up during that time more than any other time in their life, and systems disconnect then. And so we were one of the only programs in Illinois that really focused on that transition age. And so our work was around fortifying that, really being that a crossover and really helping young people, especially those that have experienced a lot of trauma, be able to not just build the resilience that they needed as they get through into young adulthood, but beyond young adulthood too. And so that's really a big piece of what we tried to solve for. And I think that we did a really good job of that. And I continue to do that a lot in my work now. And the difference now is that there has been a big focus on that population, both through the media, as well as through social services, as well as psychology and trauma, where a lot of programs have started to angle toward that. But we still have a long way to go, I think, in our systems of really connecting up how to work with that transition age. And so part of the work that I still do now is really helping to bridge that gap so that our young people have long-term success, not just immediate success.
Yeah. And this feels like one of those problems that will always be there and always need improving. So I don't think it's something that we'll ever look back on and be like, we solved transition of age youth. Like
done.
There's always unique needs. And I guess that's a good question, which is like, what is different today in 2025 impacting the youth that you're serving than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago in your eyes?
Listening to the voice of those young people. I'd love to think that I'm still a young person and my voice matters, but it really doesn't.
It does matter, Mark.
Thanks.
But we can also listen to the kids.
Good. Thank you for that support. I appreciate it. But, listening to the voices of our young people and what they're saying. And I think that we as adults have gone a lot further in doing that. And again, we still don't do a great job of it, but we're doing a lot more of it, where we're listening to what our young people are telling us that they need. And so that means sometimes that we have to back off of adulting, which is hard for me, knowing that I have 2 teenagers also. I don't do a great job of it. But listening to our young people, knowing that that's a big part of it, listening to what it is that's going to work for them, and having them be supports for each other and really leaning into that a lot more rather than saying, oh, no, we're the experts. We know what it is you need. So having our young people use their voice, having opportunities. Almost every forum I go to now has young people being able to present on a panel or being able to present at a conference or being involved in research, being involved in trainings. And it's just incredible. And I think that's the part that has really changed. And I think has slowly started to bend the curve a little bit, where we're able to think about working with transition age youth a little differently than we did before.
Super interesting. What is like 1 or 2 things that you've heard from either your kids recently or other young adults that you've served that you've been surprised by or has maybe updated the way that you think about them and their world?
Well, I think for my kids, they just tell me I'm cringy all the time, that like I'm really used to that.
It can be so cruel.
I know, and I'm so surprised because I really think I'm cool, but man, it just isn't working out for me that way. I think what our young people tell us is that, and this is something that surprised me early on, doesn't surprise me anymore, is that I want to be able to do these things myself and I want to be able to learn how to do it. And so what that means is they want to learn while doing. They want to learn through experiences. And so then we have to allow for those experiences. The challenge that we have as adults, and then even myself as a psychologist, is how do we find that right balance of allowing for that riskiness that is just a part of being a young adult and should be a part of a young adult, but knowing that that riskiness could lead to something really bad or really awful. And so then how do we have that safety net of support so that our young people are supported to try things out, figure out what fits for them, and yet also be able to have a safety net to bounce back when maybe things don't go their way, because all of that is a learning process.
Yep.
We want our young people to discover things about themselves, and this is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's true. And whenever this topic of conversation comes up, I always just think about the charts where it's like kids are spending 50% less time with their friends. They're drinking less with their friends. They are drunk driving. They're having less sex. Like all of the things that you would normally associate with like adolescent life are
Hmm.
plummeting.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like part of the childhood development during adolescence is a push for independence. It's a push for things. And
Hmm.
I've actually been surprised how many kids we serve and hear who are like, I don't want my license. Like I'm not interested. I don't want to have that level of independence,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is also an interesting counterbalance to what you said, which is th- young people seek to learn by experience, which I think is probably a manifestation of them living with the internet, living with ChatGPT, right? Having
Yeah.
access to be able to learn and do anything. So it's
Hmm.
a very interesting kind of tension between those things. And I imagine when you're thinking about supports and systems of care, like you have to think about what are the appropriate things to allow, what are the appropriate things to not allow, both in your family and more broadly. So, but yeah, it's a never-ending challenge of figuring out what young adults should be doing with their time.
Right, right. Yeah. And it isn't for us to decide in so many different ways, right? For us, it's really about setting the platform so that young people have the opportunity to interact and try things out. And so I'm really big in a concept that we kind of consider is discovery-oriented care.
Mm,
And so the idea of discovery-oriented care is really finding that right balance so that young people are able to discover who they are.
mm,
And that might be by connecting more virtually. That might be, by learning things through ChatGPT. But how do we help our young people find the right balance through all those interactions and all those areas of discovery where they're able to learn about themselves, figure out what really is a part of who they are, what they stand for, what they believe in. What are those social aspects that make them feel good about themselves? What are the things that really can be a struggle for them that they need to recognize that they're going to stay away from?
mm.
So all those pieces play a role in that as we start to see that young adult development.
How does the world that these young adults are living in and swimming in, how does that impact how you think about the role that we can jump into the time at youth care now? Like, how does that impact the role as you see it of youth care and delivering the set of services that I would say kids typically who are using the service are probably not kids who are fully well, right? Or there are areas of challenge in their life that they're hoping to get addressed. Like, how does the landscape of 2025, the digital world these kids live in, how does that impact how you think about what youth care should be doing and supporting kids with?
Yeah, and so youth care is one line of business across our Meridian family of plans, and so we're providing services to young people that are connected to the child welfare system or those that were formerly in the child welfare system. And so as a result of that, a vast majority of our young people have been through pretty serious trauma, whether that is neglect or abuse or separation. And so they carry that with them in a lot of different ways, and every young person carries that in a different way. What we have really been doing a lot of in youth care is getting a sense of how our young people connect best. And so some of them may connect to therapist or therapeutic kind of support in person or in home or something like that. But so many more are interested in small, quick touch bases, virtually, getting supports from folks when they need it most. And so that virtual platform has played a big role in our development in youth care and our work that we're doing. It both helps young people that are more interested in connecting on a virtual level just in general, because that feels better to them, but also for young people that maybe don't have easy access via
Mm,
transportation to a therapist or to, a group setting or something like that, um, because of where they live. Maybe they're in a very rural area
yeah.
and they'd have to go a lot further and there aren't buses to do that. So how can we make it so it's a little bit easier for them to do that sort of thing?
Or they move a placement and they lose the therapist they finally built a relationship with because they're now 50 miles away. Like that can
Absolutely.
really really hurt.
Absolutely. And that happens a lot too,
Yeah.
where that change may end up taking place. So that's one part of it. But then the other part of it is thinking about therapeutic and behavioral health supports a little differently too. That, similar to me, it's not just about an individual therapist and a patient, so to speak, right? We're talking about a young person that might need kind of alternatives in terms of their support. So it might mean that they connect better when they are with other young people, or they connect better when they're in a group setting instead of individual, or even with play therapy or animal therapy,
Yeah.
or through peer supports. And I think that that's one piece, that peer support area is something that, the more that we can invest in that and really harness the power of peer supports, the more our young people are going to be connected in with people that really get them and really know what they're going through and can help them with some of the trauma they've experienced.
Yeah. It's cool because I feel like I'm getting to witness a time where the traditional clinical model of supporting kids is sort of being flipped on its head, and it's going from like mostly clinical to like mostly social
Yeah.
driven, which I think is just a really interesting dynamic. And the intuition, my intuition tells me that that's probably closer to what final state will be. I'm sure that many of these kids need real formal clinical support, but at a baseline, many of them are also lacking strong friendships, consistent relationships, strong people in their community, like, especially youth in the child welfare system. Like they're sort of starved of that. And I almost, it's clear to me how much more challenging it would be to make clinical improvement if you're lacking the social support in the first place.
Yeah.
And they're probably equal parts of the spokes of a wheel,
Mm-hmm.
So that's very cool.
Yeah, and I would agree with you in so many different ways. And that's why a lot of where I've seen success, and maybe I'm biased because I've done a lot of this, but it's in kind of a multidisciplinary approach. Yeah. So you may have, a practice, so to speak, that would have a therapist involved, but then maybe also has a peer support specialist there or a family support specialist. Or you may have, work that's getting done with a young person, but in some of the programs I used to run, we would have a once-a-month outing where they would work on their socialization and, just in a natural setting where they're going on, where, our young people are going on a hike, or we're doing a Mother's Day project, or we're doing, something for Halloween. And so those were the areas that really kind of took the therapeutic work that you're doing or the trauma response work that you're doing and bringing it into real life and helping young people interact with each other.
Yeah, super cool. What challenges right now are you most excited about solving? Like, I'm sure there's, probably a list of 100 problems that you're tracking and trying to figure out. Like, what are the things that for you personally, whether or not, they're number one priority on the list, but what are you just like personally really excited about right now in terms of the kind of youth care world?
Well, challenges that I'm trying to solve. I need to figure out what I'm doing for dinner tonight. But aside from that, in the youth care world, we got a lot that we're trying to do. I would say that there's probably a couple things that really come top of mind, and one of which is it's one thing to have an array of services for young people. It's another thing to get young people engaged in doing it, because you could build it, but they might not come. It may not turn out that way as much as I love Field of Dreams. How can you find the right engagement approaches for our young people in order to get there? And so in efforts to do that, especially around young adults, because what we know is that the transition age youth population is most likely to have serious mental health needs come on, kind of arrive during that time, but they're also the least likely population to engage in services. And so that engagement tactic is really important. So what we're working on internally is how to assist all of our staff in building up those engagement practices with our young people. So that way they're interested in trying out a service that might be beneficial for them, or they're interested in connecting to a peer support, or, maybe taking on a virtual therapist when they really need that, or looking into a job opportunity. So we've been doing a lot of training around that, and I have a training curriculum that I utilize nationally with a number of providers on how to engage with transition age youth. And so we've been bringing that internally, and between that and some of the programs that we have, we're really anecdotally starting to see young people engage a lot more with what we call our adolescence to adulthood service line, which is for that age group, and some of our other service providers. And so we're starting to measure that also to see what that increase looks like. It's a little too early to tell, but that's really what I'm excited about bringing forward to get things going on a baseline level.
Super cool. It's very interesting to hear you even talk about job opportunities, because I think this is maybe like an area where it's clear that you all are innovating more than others. And like, healthcare it doesn't seem to fall just within healthcare. It seems to be sort of broader. What do you think is like the full umbrella? Like, how far out do you think a system of care really should go from a a planned perspective in order to support some of these kids? And like, how do you see kind of youth care given the full hug, I guess you could
Right.
say?
I love the full hug. Can I use that?
You could take it. There you go.
Big fan of that. So for youth care, really at our core, we are the Medicaid insurance for young people. And so you could think about it stopping there, but our young people don't stop there, right? And so the full hug part is really good because for us, we're focused on all of what we would call those social determinants of health. And so it may be about helping a young person get through school or work or relationships or wherever that is. And so our staff are really trained on how to start with where the young person is most interested, because that's where your engagement point is going to be. And so that may be through work, that may be through school. But, to that point, we do a lot of liaisoning with the schools that our young people are at and connecting them up and making sure that they're getting the right services there. Same thing with work. Work, especially for young adults, is so important. And if you think about, some of us, and we think back to our early jobs, how that sort of shaped us. And either this is something I really liked, or man, I really hated this and I don't want to ever do something like that again. And so that'll shape the world for our young adults too. It's kind of a practice ground to help them learn who they are. And so for us, investing in our young people getting those opportunities, knowing that their first job is not going to typically be their forever job, is so important. We partner with the Division of Family and Support Services, who does a youth employment work all across the city of Chicago and help sponsor some of their events. And there's just one this past weekend, actually, and work with a number of other job forward types of programs throughout the state to help our young people get those job opportunities.
Love that. What was your I never want to do this job again, early career job?
I had a number of different jobs, and the one that was most challenging was I worked for, and this was during summer break, I worked for a place where I was a data entry specialist.
Okay.
And so I had to type in, it was like catalogs back then, 720 pages, and you flip to page 534 and you get forceps that are, 3.5 feet long with 7/8 inch rings, and you have to type that into the computer. And nobody else was making noise in the room. It was me, it was air conditioning going on overhead, and there's no other noise except for people typing. And I talked to folks that I've trained before about like how I was the first one to have to get my computer replaced due to water damage. And that's because I fell asleep drooling on it. I'm not kidding. It was so bad. But I also worked at a number of food service places, a number of restaurants, all the way through graduate school. And I loved every part of it because I got to talk to people, got to connect with others, got to figure out the weirdness of others and the weirdness of me. And I love the idea of being able to connect with people and learn their story and being able to get exercise and hang out with people. I knew I wouldn't be able to do a desk job is what it came down to.
Yeah, I love that. Were there any lessons that you learned from that time in your life or career that have still stuck with you today about how you show up? I mean, now you're leading a team. You've got lots of people who rely on you, depend on you. Like, were there any early lessons that you learned?
There's a lot of lessons, and man, I'm still learning. I learned so much from my staff, but a couple of things I think really made a big difference is that you got to be able to get your team excited about a particular project. And if you don't have a team that's excited about that particular project, then it's not going to go anywhere. So you may have the funding, you may have the support of your supervisors, but you got to have a team that's working on getting those details going. And a lot of times to get that excitement going, it's because they're able to see some of the results that will play out with the young people, because that's what they're there for. That's what I'm there for, is that we want to have positive results with our young people. And so that plays a big role. And so can we establish that excitement in whether that's through potential outcomes, whether that's through taking ownership over something, whether that's what we do a lot of, which is to have focus groups with young people and families so they can let us know what's most important to them and then get that excitement rolling. So that's been a big part of developing new things and developing programs, and then also being able to support them through, both humor, through being able to allow your team to vent to you, being able to allow for failures to happen and talk through that and get an understanding of it and discover ourselves the same way we're asking our young people to discover themselves of what we can do a little bit differently.
What are some areas where you still feel like you want to grow more as a leader?
There's a lot. And I think one thing that I know I could do a lot more of is finding ways to celebrate our successes.
Mm.
You think about that as sort of a frivolous thing, as like one of those things that's just kind of like, yeah, okay. But the thing is that if you're going to have long-term leaders amongst your team, they are going to be burned out if they continue to go from one crisis to another
Yep.
crisis, because our young people are always going to have something going on. And we can't show up for our young people and our families unless we feel like we're filled in the way that we need to be. And so that often means stepping back and celebrating some of those successes, even if it's a small, win, if it's a small kudos, it's all those things. And I think I could be doing a much better job of taking the time to do that so that our staff are continuing to feel filled, continuing to feel like they are interested in that work and are ready to go to that next step or next project.
Yeah, man, I resonate with that so much. And as you're talking, I'm like, I think the reason why I don't do that enough is because my job and your job too is also to always be 100% aware of all the problems all the time.
Right.
And so it's like you spend all your day just thinking about problems. So even when one awesome thing happens, you got the 100 list of other problems that you're still worried about, and it doesn't counterbalance. But I think to your point, motivating teams and keeping people excited, they're not thinking about the 100. They're actually thinking about the one thing that they worked for months on that finally launched.
Right.
And yeah, a little bit of celebration and appreciation never actually hurt. And in fact, I've actually been surprised in my experience leading how a small amount of just genuine appreciation, which we all have internally, but openly shared, can actually really bond people, can really make people feel bonded to the work that they're doing. And it's such a small, simple thing. But to your point, it's not as easy as it sounds, which is weird. But
Well, in being a psychologist, you would think that I'm more in tune to the feelings around all that, not as in tune to the business end of let's get to the next thing. But for some reason, for me, my DNA has made that kind of opposite. But I'm also lucky to have a really incredible team that continues to move forward with a number of things and a number of initiatives. But I think for all of us to be able to like make sure that we're doing that a lot more is super important.
I can imagine that the only second to being humbled by how you show up for your team is being humbled by how you show up for your kids in terms of your confidence as a clinical psychologist. I'm sure that every psychologist has been humbled by their kids at some point, thinking that they know everything, but they don't.
Yeah, well, being a psychologist and then having a wife that's a psychologist, you would assume that my kids are going to turn out very, very, very troubled. And so, we have to try to work very hard to not bring that home. And luckily, we have fantastic pair of kids.
That is so funny. Talk to me about like the sort of the broader arc of where we are in history when it comes to the youth that you're serving, right? It's 2025. We got a lot of unique challenges. We've already talked about a little bit of the challenges that you face, but like, go 15 years into the future. Like, what do you hope, if everything goes right, what do you hope that future to look like for our young people, our youth in foster care? What do you hope that future looks like?
Yeah, I think we're in a very challenging time right now where we with lots of changes going on in our environment everywhere, and I think that the emergence out of COVID plays one element of that. I think a lot of the changes in policy from the federal level is changing a lot of that too, where young people are less likely to connect in person. And I think you've mentioned that already, and I would agree with that. And I think that especially youth of color are really worried about connecting in person. And as a result, they're taking up a lot more of our virtual spaces or not connecting at all. And it's that not connecting at all that I really do worry about right now. So it's, again, comes down to that engagement piece and how important that's going to be with a lot of our young people. The other thing that the changes in Medicaid often push for, and we've seen this through history, is that when we have changes like we're looking toward in Medicaid, the historical data demonstrates that more young people come into care. And so that's, I think, another worry that we have as a sector is that the amount of young people that come into care may start to spike, which, will still be there to be able to provide those services, but nobody wants more young people coming into care due to abuse, neglect, separation, all the rest of that. So I think that the things that I'm hoping for as we move forward down the road 10, 15 years from now is that we're able to kind of get over that hump and figure out where that soft spot is and find the right balance of policy, of practice, of services so that the trajectory of young people coming to care is less and their time in care ends up being less as well. And so what that means is that we have the engagement tactics that are super important for families and for young people, that we are leaning on AI in a way that's really helpful for our therapeutic approaches, and being able to kind of connect in a way with our young people and our families where they're able to get a variety of different services and supports um, in a way that reduces wait time, that reduces strife, and that maybe both keeps young people out of the system or keeps them from staying in the system for a very long time. And then if they are in there, being able to transition them out so that they have long-term success. So I really think that leveraging a lot of our technology, changes in some of our policy, and really kind of finding those creative elements within a Medicaid product that we've really been leaning on in youth care can help kind of move a whole new generation of young people into adulthood with incredible outcomes, with incredible stability, and with having the relationships and work and school and all of those aspects that they're really craving.
I like the way you frame it, which was essentially get people engaged, use technology to connect them with the appropriate tool and service. And with that framing, like, you put that on any time in the future, and that is always going to be the strategy, right? It's sort of that is the work that we're doing. The technology that we're using will be different. The services may be different, but like the ultimate goal of getting people to engage and then connect them with the technology and services to do it, like, that is the work. And it makes sense when you put it that way. What do you expect to be sort of like the biggest levers for positive momentum over the next decade? Like, as you think ahead, is it on the technology side? Is it on the service side? Is it on the engagement side? Like, where do you feel like, if you were going to make a bet, like, where do you think the biggest levers would be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd love to say that I can give you some more definitive part on that. And I just
You don't have the magic orb? You can't tell me the future?
I don't have a lot of it yet. I think so much of it is still in development because of the times that we're in. But what I do hope for is a couple different things. And I think it's in a couple different areas. I think one area is really in that technology space, that we're able to leverage technology in a way where we can get the right services to young people and to families in a more efficient way, in a more in a more I don't know how to put it, but kind of in a very loose way, so to speak, meaning that a family can connect with a service here or a service there or a service over there, and we're all connected in the same system. So being able to do that in a way that can really help a young person, a family get together a lot easier. I think that we're going to have communication flows that make a lot more sense rather than having system dynamics that don't interface with each other very well. So I think that is part of our future, and we need to help develop some of that. So that's kind of on the technology side. I think then in the practice side, I see a lot of maybe nontraditional therapies that'll make a big difference. So again, really bring in peer supports as a big part of the work that we do. Thinking about how paraprofessionals can play a role. Thinking about how family, that's not just your direct family unit, can play a role. And that might be faith-based services as well, and other things along those lines. So I think that that's developing over time. And then I think the relational piece is going to have to be paramount. So as much as we move into a technology wave and have folks and young people that are disconnecting a little bit more, at the end of the day, we're relational. And so that relationship piece of getting young people the services that they need in that trauma recovery is going to be so super important to engage them in all these new opportunities that are going to be coming around.
Love it. You mentioned earlier that one of the things you liked about one of your early career jobs was that you get to discover the weirdness in other people and the weirdness in yourself. And I get the sense that, and I say this in the best way, I get the sense that you embrace the weird. What are some ways that you try to show up as your authentic self in doing this work, and that you feel like make you proud to sort of be Marc?
Part of what I do a lot of is training for my staff and training for other organizations. And so a lot of what I love the most is when young people that are maybe peer supports or maybe young people that are service recipients might be in some of my trainings. And so I have no problems kind of showing up and making fun of myself or playing music that is back from when I was young. And I'm like, isn't this great? Let's get to it. And, there have been times where we've broken out into dancing competitions
Awesome.
or, there's a couple trainings we've done where we have paper airplane tosses and competitions that way. Or we've had Halloween events where I've shown up as a rock star or something like that because that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. And maybe I still want to be a little bit, time will tell. We'll find out.
It's not too late, Mark.
Yeah.
It's not too late.
Still working on that, right? I have no problems kind of letting myself be made fun of by our young people in many different ways for my oldness or my cringiness.
Love it. Cool. What you also seem like you're just a person who bursts with enthusiasm for life and optimism. Like what keeps you motivated? What keeps your battery going, your wheels moving?
First of all, I love the work that we do in youth care. I absolutely love the work that we're doing. I love my team. I love the innovations that we're doing. I think that really gets me going and getting up in the morning to be able to know that we're working on a new arrangement with a provider or that we are finding something creative to do to engage with our young people or that, we've had this really great interaction with a legislator that's going to help open up, particular services. Those are the things that really get me excited and I love to do. And I don't, a lot of people might talk about like the high that they can get from work. And I think that that's really the high that we get a lot of times is seeing some of those positive changes in our work and then in the world of our young people, especially when they've had such challenges. I love when we have events where our young people and our families are there and we're able to talk with them and just kind of hang out, and I can talk a little bit about my life. I get to hear a little bit about theirs and it just gets to be a lot of fun to do those sorts of things. So that's one really big part. The other thing that gets me going during the day is how we have, despite so many different changes and things in flux in our communities and in our state and in our nation, that we have really smart, strong advocates in our work that are like-minded and thinking that way and are also open to hearing other sides. And I think that that's something that doesn't come naturally in our day and age. But the folks that not only are in our company, but that are way beyond our company and within our stakeholders have such smart, incredible thoughts about what we want to do. And it's really about how can we then carry that out to the next level.
Yeah. I also feel inspired every day by the people who are out there just like giving their entire life to try to make the lives of other young people better in a lot of ways where I'm like, there's probably other things you could be doing with your life, but it's just, it's same with you. It just drives them. And it's so beautiful to see that. Before I ask my last question, where can people learn more about YouthCare, the work that you're doing, if they want to dive in more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're at www.ilyouthcare.com. IL standing for Illinois. And so that's our website. We have all of our services and supports there that go beyond just the work that we do in Medicaid and all the other add-ons that we do for our young people. And then we also provide a lot of training to the communities. So for folks that might be interested in a particular training topic, can look us up and hit us up for some of that too.
Cool. Sweet. All right. My last question, I ask this to everyone who comes on the show. If you could snap your fingers today and magically change anything about the world towards improving the life of young people, what would you snap your fingers and do?
I would find a way to make sure that every young person has access to the kinds of supports that they need as soon as they need it, knowing that that's variable in all kinds of different ways. So having the availability and the connections to be able to provide that for every young person exactly when they need that. And then having the adult in their life that is going to be with them throughout all of their challenges. So it's a service thing and then it's a relational thing. So having that one adult at least that's going to be there for that young person as they get through all their trials and tribulations into adulthood and beyond.
Cool. Awesome. Mark, thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's great to know you. And I'm glad that you exist in the world and are giving so much of your gifts to the world. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is great. Appreciate it.
Cool.